Episode 15. Why most men stay stuck longer than they need to. One of the biggest, probably the most common things I've noticed with talking with guys the last little while is that most men stay stuck way longer than they need to. And not because they're weak, right? We've covered all this. There's no crap here. Not because they don't care, and honestly, not even because they lack discipline. But guys stay stuck because they're trying to see themselves clearly while still living inside of survival mode. And survival mode just distorts everything. And this is from experience for me. I stayed in this spot for a long time. Survival mode distorts how you see yourself, how you see all of your circumstances, everything around you, how you see your marriage, how you see your future, how you see God, how you see your own worth, and how you see what's even possible in your life anymore. So, I've talked with guys who look completely fine if you were looking at them from the outside. Business owners, tradesmen, fathers, providers, leaders, guys who are still showing up every day, still functioning, still handling the responsibilities that they have to handle. But internally, they're just exhausted. And not always physically, sometimes physically, but exhausted spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And after a while, this is what happens. They just start believing that this is just life, man. That's the most dangerous part. It's the struggle. The struggle isn't what's dangerous. It's normalizing the struggle. Because when a man lives in survival long enough, dysfunction just starts to feel normal. The short temper feels normal. The scrolling feels normal. The emotional shutdown feels normal. Numbness, normal. The distance in the marriage starts feeling normal. Anxiety feels normal. The constant pressure feels normal, especially for business owners. Just, pressure is part of the game, but you start to accept all of these other things around it as normal. Mental noise, normal. The lack of peace feels normal. And because everybody around him is living the same way too, he just stops questioning it. He just keeps enduring. But brother, enduring is not the same thing as living. And this is why so many men secretly just feel trapped. Not because they're incapable of change, because they've adapted to dysfunction for so long, they no longer recognize what alignment even looks like. And I think that's why so many men keep searching for answers in things like motivation, looking for another breakthrough, another business strategy, another productivity system, another dopamine hit, another distraction. And I tell you what, there's the marketing world, they understand these needs and they feed off of it. And so the noise just keeps getting louder when you stay stuck in that loop. But deep down, these guys, we know something is off, right? They can't fully see it from inside the loop. And that's the thing about loops. When you're stuck inside them, they feel like reality, right? You don't realize that you're reacting the same way, that you're shutting down the same way, that you're escaping the same way, or drifting the same way, or thinking the same way until somebody outside the loop helps you finally see it clearly. And that's why isolation becomes so dangerous, because isolation distorts your perspective. A man alone inside his own thinking long enough eventually starts believing every thought that he thinks, that's just the way it is. And when your nervous system is exhausted, your thoughts get darker, man. More hopeless, more reactive, more emotional, more fear-based. And that's why so many men secretly feel emotionally unsafe inside their own mind. Not because they're crazy, because they've been carrying pressure silently for so long. And again, most guys don't even realize how much pressure they're actually carrying. They just keep functioning underneath it. And that's why the modern world celebrates men who just keep grinding while quietly falling apart internally. But brother, you can only survive like that for a while, and eventually it leaks. It leaks into your marriage, into your patience, into your leadership, into your peace, your body, into your health, into all of your relationships, your relationship with God, and more than anything, your ability to feel any sort of happiness or joy in your life. And one of the biggest lies men start to believe is, if I can just push harder, I'll eventually break through. No! Sometimes pushing harder inside the wrong pattern just deepens your exhaustion. And that's why awareness matters so much. Not self-condemnation, not beating yourself up anymore, but just simple awareness. Because once a man starts seeing the pattern, he stops fighting himself blindly. And this is one of the biggest shifts that I see in guys who actually start rebuilding their lives. They recover faster. And that might sound like a small thing, but it isn't. Because before, one bad moment, and I know this from my life, one bad moment became 3 bad days, then 3 bad weeks, then isolation and shame, then drifting, and then just more self-destruction. But something starts changing when a man begins aligning. He catches it earlier. He notices the pull earlier. He interrupts the pattern earlier. And he stops turning one bad moment into another lost season. And that's huge. And honestly, one of the first signs a man is actually healing usually isn't motivation. It's a feeling of relief. Relief that he's not crazy. Relief that somebody finally understands what he's experiencing underneath the surface. Relief that maybe he's not broken. Relief that maybe this isn't just who he is. Maybe that the patterns can actually change. And that brings relief. And when that relief hits, peace starts returning. Slowly, quietly, with comfort, with confidence. Not because life suddenly gets easy, but because the internal war starts decreasing. The battle slows down. And that's what I think a lot of men are really starving for right now. Not for hype, but just for peace. Peace in their nervous system, peace in their thoughts, peace in their marriage and in their home, and just in their spirit, right? In their relationship with God. And the strange thing is most men don't even realize how much their life has been shaped by the people around them, the places they put themselves. You've probably heard the saying, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Most people hear that from a financial perspective, but it's true emotionally too. It's true spiritually and mentally and physically. In all ways, this pattern will play out throughout your life. If the people around you are reactive, cynical, constantly complaining, distracted, negative, emotionally immature, trapped in survival, always focused on themselves, eventually that starts shaping who you are too. And the dangerous part is most guys never stop long enough to realize that their environment is reinforcing the very patterns that they're trying to escape. Even Jesus lived differently than that. Yes, he ministered to crowds, of course. Yes, he discipled the 12. But within that 12, he kept 3 especially close. Why do you think that is? It's because proximity matters. Influence matters. Environment matters. What you let into your eyes, your ears, your brain, your heart, it matters. And a man rises or falls partially based on the conversations that he lives inside every day. the external ones and the ones going on inside your head. And most men don't have a place to go anymore where people are willing to just be calm, to be truthful, to be objective, to be growth oriented. You got to put yourself in a special place to find these things, right? Place where others are aligned with God, place where people are willing to change from a loving perspective, willing to raise their standard instead of reinforce their excuses. And that's why isolation quietly destroys so many guys. Because eventually, you normalize the level you're surrounded by. Brotherhood is not guys helping each other just stay comfortable, right? You've heard the saying, iron sharpens iron. Real brotherhood calls men higher. Not through shame, not through ego, not through all the crap that you see on the internet and all these other places, not through hype, but through truth, through perspective, through example, through alignment. And sometimes one honest conversation with the right man can save another man years of drifting. And that starts to change things, right? Because sometimes men think they need motivation. That's what I hear more often than not, that I just need to be more disciplined. I need more motivation. But most of the time, they just need objective perspective. They need somebody outside the loop, somebody calm enough to help them see what they can't see from inside their survival mode. And I think that's why eventually men reach out. Not because they're weak, but because they're tired of circling the same mountain, tired of losing years to the same. I know I was. I mean, it was the same thing year after year. Tired of restarting over and over and over. Tired of drifting. Tired of carrying everything alone. And maybe that's you right now. Maybe you're functioning perfectly well externally. No reason to change. Everything looks great. But internally, something just feels heavy, disconnected, noisy, off. Maybe part of you already knows, I can't go on living like this forever. Brother, that's awareness, and it matters. Because most men don't ruin their lives in one dramatic event. I want you to know this. They slowly bleed out. They slowly drift while telling themselves, I'm just tired. I'll figure it out later. This is normal. This is just life. Until years, decades disappear. And I think one of the hardest questions a man eventually has to ask himself is this. How much is staying stuck actually costing me? And I'm not just talking about financially here. Costing you emotionally. Costing you spiritually, relationally, physically, your health. What is drift costing your marriage, your kids, your peace, your confidence, your relationship with God, your future? Because sometimes men stay stuck for years trying to avoid the discomfort of facing the truth. But they pay a much bigger price every day they stay right where they are. And I want you to hear me here. You don't need to become a different man overnight. That's not what this is. You don't need to have everything figured out. You do not need to pretend you're okay anymore either. You just need to stop fighting alone inside patterns that are quietly just destroying your peace. Scripture says, carry each other's burdens. It's from the Bible. It wasn't written because men are weak. It was written because isolation was never the human design. And maybe the strongest thing a man can finally do is tell the truth about where he actually is. And I'm not talking about someday. I'm talking about facing it now. You know, if somewhere in this episode you realize you're tired of carrying this all alone, that's exactly why Resurrection Kings exists. Not to sell you hype, not to motivate you temporarily, but to help men rebuild. Rebuild peace, alignment, rebuild internal authority, rebuild a connection with God, rebuild structure, rebuild steadiness, rebuild truth. And there's a free app. It's called Sivrin that helps men stop drifting unconsciously through their days. There's also the Real Fight Field Guide that helps expose the strongholds and patterns underneath what's really been happening internally. And if you're ready for an honest conversation, objective perspective, and real structure around rebuilding your life, that's what the coaching path is for. You can find everything at resurrectionkings.com, but more than anything, stop ignoring the part of you that already knows something needs to change. Because the man who finally tells the truth about where he is usually the man whose life is finally about to move forward. And we're just getting started.